Welcome back to our study on the book of Romans. This is the Romans Education Part 7, and this is Session 20. We left off last time looking at verse 9, where John writes in his first epistle, "He that saith he's in the light and hateth his brother is in darkness even until now." And this is going back to that teaching that the Lord gave Himself about loving one another, and that was at odds with what all of the leaders of Israel's vain religious system had been teaching. And so John is writing that if you say you're operating in the light, but you hate your brother, that you're in darkness. Of course, he's writing that to the believing remnant of Israel. And what we see as we go down through 1 John is that he is going to become more and more precise with this issue of light and darkness. John is going to narrow it down to the written Word of God, which is light, and that's coming through the mouth of the pens of the apostles as they're writing that Word of truth. And on the other side, you have apostate Israel with their mishandling of the Scriptures, with their misinformation and their corrupted doctrine and their traditions of men, and all those kinds of issues coming together. And so you have those two contrasting groups again. You have the apostles writing the word of truth, and then you have the Pharisees and the Sadducees and the scribes and the lawyers and all that group on the other side. And now John has come down to giving us an example. And an example of that would be saying that you're in the light, but hating your brother. Now verse 10, "He that loveth his brother abideth in the light, and there's none occasion of stumbling in him. But he that hateth his brother is in darkness, and walketh in darkness, and knoweth not whither he goeth, because that darkness hath blinded his eyes." And so, for a believing member of the remnant, are they justified unto eternal life? Yes, they are. And this is the scary part, they have the ability to walk in the light or walk in darkness. Huh? We all have that ability. We all have. Even though we're saved, we have the ability to walk in light or walk in darkness, just like the believing remnant did. And because this starts out with, God is light and in Him is no darkness at all, then we know that God is truth and in Him is no untruth at all. He's the author of truth. He's the very embodiment of truth. By default, the darkness is the lie or the untruth, and that's exactly what Satan is. Now, I'm going to take you to a verse here. I memorized this verse years and years ago, back when I was a young preacher boy. I mean, it's been a long time ago. Anyway, I heard a preacher preach one time, and he called out this verse in John 8:44. And it made such an impact on me, I flipped over the back of my Bible, and I wrote that verse in, and just kind of a note about it, because I wanted to remember where to find that verse. What I didn't know is the issue that we are discussing now. But I wanted to show you this, because if God is light, which is truth, and in Him is no darkness at all, there's no untruth in God, then the very opposite would be true for Satan, who is darkness, and in Him would be no light at all. So take a look at what John 8:44 says, because remember, this is 1 John, so here's John writing in his gospel, and he's talking to the Pharisees and the scribes, and he says, "Ye are of your father the devil, and the lust of your father ye will do. He was a murderer from the beginning, and abode not in the truth." There's that issue of truth again. Because there is no truth in Him. Now when you think about that, that's a pretty amazing statement. There's no truth in Him. When He speaketh a lie, He speaketh of His own, for He is a liar and the father of it. You realize that's the very opposite about saying God is light and in Him is no darkness at all. That is the equivalent of saying Satan is darkness and in Him is no light at all. So there's your two contrasting parties again. We keep seeing this over and over. And so the remnant has a choice to either walk in light or to walk in darkness. And if their deeds don't match up with their words or with that word of truth, let me say it that way, then they are walking in darkness. And that's what Satan is trying to produce as the power of darkness. That's where he's trying to get that to go. That armor is going to be the defense against the untruth, the darkness of the untruth. Actually, let me say, it's going to be the defense against the works of darkness. No, you're not going to be cowardly. You're going to have to be more than a conqueror. And now, I don't want to get ahead of where I'm trying to go here, but sitting back in the Gospels, there is something there that says that that darkness can masquerade as light. And you really can get to thinking that something that is darkness is light. I thought that was a pretty amazing thing, and so I want to take you over to these couple of verses. 1 John 1:5. You know what? Before I show you those, I just want to show you where John is again talking to the remnant, and he's talking to them about the possibility of them walking in darkness. This then is the message which we have heard of Him, and declare unto you that God is light, and in Him is no darkness at all. If we, notice how John is including himself here, personal pronoun. If we say that we have fellowship with Him and walk in darkness, we lie and do not the truth. I'm just trying to establish the fact that that isn't just for unsaved people. True of the remnant, also true for us. Now, those verses, Matthew 6:23. But if thine eye be evil, the whole body shall be full of darkness. If therefore the light that is in thee be darkness, how great is that darkness? If the light that be in thee be darkness. You say, well, wait a minute. If it's light, it can't really be darkness. But you know what that is? That is an untruth that is perceived to be truth. Has there ever been something that you believed was true and then later you learned something about the Bible and you thought, that's not so? For what? Praying for rain. Yeah, you know what? You thought that was light at one time. And then you found out, oh, you know what? That wasn't light at all. That was part of the corrupted doctrine for the dispensation of grace. Look at Luke 11:35. Take heed therefore that the light which is in thee be not darkness. Is it possible to be deceived into thinking something is true when in actuality it's untrue? Look, it's not just possible, it is everywhere. It's everywhere. You can't. I would say there's more of that than there is the other.
Yeah, they say it's that little gray area that you float.
Yeah. In the physical realm, we know light can't be darkness, but this is mistaking the untruth for the truth. Now, let me give you a couple of examples here. In fact, let's use Linda's. The praying for rain thing that we see all the time. I see it on those church billboard markers when we drive to Glenrose. Pray for rain. And then now they're praying for it to stop, right? This, if it's untrue, if God's not doing it, if it's untrue, who would you suspect? Now I know people say it, but who would you suspect is the driving force behind untruth in the world? It would have to be Satan, wouldn't it? Which means he has developed in this night of increasing darkness, he has developed, and in this dispensation of grace, now that won't have developed back here, but in this increase, he's developed untruths. Now that we're in the dispensation of grace, do you think Satan would develop a system of untruths by which saved people ought to live today? Now that just makes perfect sense to me. that He would do that. He's continuing the night. That's what He's doing. And so He's using the untruths that would be so for us. And you know, and here's the point I want to make, and this is, it's not hard to say, but I don't like to say it because of what it means. If I stand up here and say, hey, Billy and I are taking a trip and I need everybody to pray that God will give us traveling mercies and keep us safe and put an angel on all the bumpers and make sure I don't go to sleep and keep all the people from running into us and don't let any critters run out in the road and don't let us have a flat and and all of that. And God's going to do all that. And by the way, there was a day when we didn't say it that elaborately, but we kind of thought God was watching over us. You know, because I realize now that's not true, and I understand who the author, according to John 8:44, the author of the untruth, the lie is, then you know what I'm doing? I am contributing to the darkness of this world. I'm cooperating with Satan's night. Now, can I do that and not mean to do that? Absolutely. And I think there's a whole bunch of that. But why am I saying that? Why am I saying that? Because here's the question. Well, even if they pray, God give us rain, and we know He's not going to do it, what difference does it make if they say it? Here's the difference. The difference is Satan is promoting the darkness of untruth, and God is promoting the light of truth. And to conduct yourself in accordance with Satan's darkness, I think, is damaging to the truth. Because every time someone hears a preacher get up and say, pray for rain, or every time they hear you talk about, well, we've been praying for rain, you know what that does? It is the repetition of the untruth that starts getting seeded into people's minds that makes them think, well, you know, maybe we just ought to pray for rain. I mean, do you see what? It gets so, it's like Israel. It gets so entrenched in your thinking that if anybody ever comes along with the light, they immediately get looked at the same way Jesus got looked at by the Pharisees and the Sadducees, who thought they were righteous, but were actually promoting the darkness of this world. And if you come along and you say to folks, hey, you can pray for God to take away your pneumonia, but He's not going to do it, you know what that'll do? That'll lose you your job in most churches. God's not going to send rain. That will cost you. That'll get you a meeting with a bunch of folks that'll say, if you're going to keep preaching here, you're going to have to stop that. That's what that does. And you know what that is? People love darkness rather than light. They love darkness. Did you catch that word that we saw? Men love darkness. In other words, they love the untruth. Now, why would anybody love untruth? Why? It's easy. Because it usually gives them what they want. No accountability is one. Huh? It does. It makes them feel good. It does. And it gives them what they want. Look, you know what? Here's how I think. All I'm saying is, and by the way, when Jesus says that, He's really looking at a condition in the world and in Israel where the light was almost completely extinguished. So things were in a really bad position at that particular time. And so when you come back to the remnant, can't you just imagine once this is over and then you get back over here and you get into the Daniel's 70th week and the temple is being rebuilt, and you're a member of the believing remnant, and your family says, hey, when they get the temple rebuilt now, we're going to be participating. We got to get those animal sacrifices back. No more Wailing Wall. Now we're going to have the temple. And if you're a member of the believing remnant, can you imagine the kind of pressure that will be on you to go back and participate in that. And some will. There's going to be a lot of, hey, you know what? You don't want your family to disown you over this. And even if you pay that price, can you see the way that you would justify this? Well, look, I know that those sacrifices don't really do anything. It's just the blood of bulls and goats. And I know the Messiah has already come. But I mean, after all, if I go in there, what harm does it really do? You understand that you're cooperating with the power of darkness. And you are contributing to the darkness of His night. That's what that would be. Now, does that make any difference to God whatsoever? If it doesn't make any difference, why have 1 John write, if we say we're in the light but we hate our brother, we're in darkness? Why didn't he just say, but if you are, it's no big deal? Why didn't he just say that? What does it matter? It matters because there's two things at work here. Darkness and light. Truth and untruth. God and Satan. The Word and the vain traditions of men. What? The believing remnant, the apostate nation. Now let's put it into the dispensation of grace. Sons and daughters. Children of God. I mean, look, I'm not saying everybody is on purpose doing it. But I am saying that when you contribute to darkness, you have still contributed to darkness. When you propagated the untruth, you still propagated the untruth. Is that meaningful to your Heavenly Father at all? Then if it is, then we have an issue here that we're going to have to face. So, let me just move us on here to this next level, because I want to, I say level, but move you on to this next part, because I want to talk about this one more time, because of here's what Satan is seeking to do. In this part of the night, and I talked to you about this a little bit earlier, and I want to say something else about it. In writing to the believing remnant over here in 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John, they're getting instruction about what Satan is going to do to use his darkness to extinguish their light. Now, as you think about that, you have to kind of say to yourself, how in the world can darkness extinguish light? Well, you can look at that in a couple of different ways. One of those is, if the pressure comes on the remnant, you know what that's made to do? It's to make them back off of the light. What is it that Satan... Now think about this. I know we haven't talked... you know the answer to this, but we just haven't talked about it. What is it that Satan is doing to produce this night? What does the Bible call it? What is he doing? The Bible has a term for it. Yes, works of darkness. He is producing works of darkness. And that darkness is producing a nighttime of untruth, of darkness. Those are the works that we cast off. And if we cast off the things that are causing his darkness to prevail, then you know what we'll start doing here? Look, think of it like this. Have you ever been on the highway and you've been driving beside those tractor trailers, and when they're really loaded, when they get to a hill, you know, you can have it on cruise and they're going to pass you. But when you hit that hill, all of a sudden he's about halfway past you, and then all of a sudden he starts slowing, and you're just cruising right on up the hill, and he falls back, depending on how long the hill is. He may actually get back over behind you. But when he starts on that downhill, he moves over, and here he comes again. And you know what he's doing? He's using that downhill now to help him get rolling and get on around you. Momentum. That is exactly what Satan is trying to do during this dispensation of grace. He is gaining some momentum to take him into the last part of this night where he is going to intensify the things that he is doing to extinguish the light that is over here being shined by the believing remnant. And as he is doing that, now here's what's going to happen. I just asked you the question, what is it that produces that night? It's his works of darkness. And if you're casting off his works of darkness, you know what that's like? It's like making that thing run uphill for a tractor trailer. All of a sudden now it's losing steam, it's losing momentum, it's starting to slow down. And he can't have that, because there's something that has to be done over here, and in order to do it, he needs a full head of steam running into that night. And if you finally get to the place where you start bogging that process down or slowing him down, if you get in front of that and he can't get around it and he's having to gear down, or you're doing something to cast off those works so that he loses steam, that affects what he's trying to do once Israel's program gets resumed. That forces him now to deal with you. That's why the response is going to come from the adversary, because, look, let me say it this way. I was going to say, I don't even know if you'll get this. I think you will, but let me just say it this way. In the old days, we said, Satan hates us because we're Christians. Remember how we said that? He hates us because we're Christians. Are you kidding me? Some Christians are among his best workers. He doesn't hate you because you're a Christian. See, in the old days, we didn't understand anything about this, so we thought the whole issue was only about being saved or being lost. And so if that was the issue, Satan wanted everyone to be lost because he didn't want us to go to heaven. You know what? It's not really, I know this is going to sound strange to you, it is not a big deal. I'm not saying he doesn't care at all, but it's not a big deal to him if you get saved. Can you get that for me, Eric, back there? That thing has been open and closed about 3 times. My eyes keep fastening on it, and finally my mind is just going to wander off. Thank you for that. Yeah, Satan opened the door, right. Look, you know what? Oh, man. Hey, I know I told you the story. This is one of the stories I know you remember. You remember the illustrations and the scripture references. We were having this film that we were showing for a bunch of kids in a big children's church when I was in Baton Rouge. And so we had, I don't know, several hundred kids in the auditorium, and we were getting ready to show this film. We're going to give an invitation at the end and try to lead these kids to the Lord. And you just turned the film on, and the bulb went, and it went out. And I remember the guy that was running the projector said, "The devil burned the bulb out." So you know what? He said, "But I've got a spare." So he goes over to the case and he pulls the spare out. Now, back then I don't know any of this doctrine, but I'm wondering the whole time he puts the new bulb in, he turns it on, and then we watch the film. And here's what I'm thinking. If you're the devil and you really don't want the film to be shown, can't you just burn out the backup bulb? I mean, what happened? Is he under a, I can only burn out one bulb a day rule or something? I mean, I didn't read that in the scripture anywhere, but I'm just wondering about that. Why? If you were the devil, you could burn out the first bulb. Couldn't you burn out the second bulb? Yeah, or couldn't you just cause the projector to malfunction? I'm looking at that and I'm thinking, okay, the devil burned the first bulb out, but is he just stupid? Burn the next one out. We don't have another backup. See, those are questions that, and if you ask somebody about that, here's what the answer you get. Well, God didn't let him burn out the backup. You realize, of course, none of that's in your Bible. You created that out of the air. You know what it is? It's darkness. But you know what? Anybody that believes that, it's light. To them, it's light. And that's those verses. Take heed that the light that be in thee be not darkness. Don't be fooled into this stuff that you think. So here's the point. Here's the point I was going to make before the door flung itself open. Satan's not really worried about it if you get saved. He's not really worried about it if you're sure of your salvation. Would he rather you not? Of course. But that's not the issue for him. And he's not really worried if you want to get on this super separated tangent that I don't do anything. I'm like a monk.
But if you start fighting him, why he does?
I'm working there, Bertha. Okay. And he doesn't really care if you want to get involved in some kind of extra ministry type deal. He's not going to stop you from that. There is one thing, though, that he will personally attack you over to get you to stop. And that is this sonship education. Because you can do all of the other. Listen, I don't mean this to be denigrating saved people. For all those years that I was saved and had these standards in my life and was sincere, and I mean, I was. Sarita will tell you, she's known me for a long time. I've been sincere my whole ministry. I had zero ability to impact what Satan was doing in his night of darkness in this world. You say, well, do you need to lead people to Christ? Of course I did. But that didn't impact his darkness. That did not. Didn't you preach the Bible? Yeah, but I didn't know enough about it to be able to show anybody or even know myself how to cast off the works of darkness. I didn't know how to do that. I didn't know anything about that. And so as long as his night, you have to understand, there's a big picture here. And the big picture doesn't have my mug on it. My portrait is not hanging up there in Satan's most hated, most wanted group. He has a bigger agenda. And this whole thing that he's been doing in the night was happening before I came along, and it'll be happening after I'm gone. Either after I die or after the blessed hope. But either way, it's going to continue right along because Satan has this ultimate agenda that he's trying to get pushed through, and the only time he really worries about me or anybody else is when we slow that process down and start impacting what he's doing. Think about Satan being the truck driver of darkness. And he's got a load he's going to deliver. And it's got to be delivered at a certain time. And as long as I can keep him from making that delivery or slow him down, now he's going to have to deal with whoever does that. Paul did that. And he was trying to deal with Paul to get him to back off. Now let's put it in the terms the Bible uses, because the Bible really doesn't talk about truckloads of darkness going down the highway of, okay, that's just going to get ridiculous, isn't it? What it's talking about is light and darkness. And so as he is pushing this darkness, your Father is about light. And there's an armor of light. And that truth in that armor is going to be your defense against the attacks of the adversary. Now we are going to learn more about that. Now let me show you this next one here. Because look, I still didn't drive that point home. Did I? All that stuff that we thought Satan was worried about, he's not. Because it doesn't impact what he's doing. I'm not saying he loves it. I'm just saying it doesn't matter. Just have this little sneaky feeling I'm just not... Okay. 1 John, I'm sorry. He that hateth his brothers in darkness and walketh in the darkness knoweth not whither he goeth, because the darkness hath blinded his eyes. The darkness can be blinding. And it not only will diminish the light by having you back off, or by having the believing remnant back off, But there is another way that darkness has extinguished light, and this is just an analogy, just in a picture. You're familiar with a thing called a black hole. In the universe, there are areas where the gravitational pull is so great that it pulls everything in and nothing escapes, not even light. Now, it's amazing to think that light is subject to gravity. Can you imagine how much gravity it would take to keep light from moving out? You know what a black hole does? And if you just read about them, here's what you'll find out. It swallows up everything, even light. So if you want to make that analogy, I'll tell you what Satan's darkness is trying to do. It's trying to operate as the black hole of our dispensation of grace. It's trying to swallow up the light. That's what it is geared to do. I just want to talk about that second way in which we can kind of make that analogy. Now, 1 John 4:1, Beloved, believe not every spirit, but try the spirits, whether they are of God, because many false prophets are gone out into the world. Now, this is John writing, and you remember what I told you? You have the word of truth on the one side, and so what's the opposite of that? The false prophets. So you're going to have the prophets of truth, because they're going to have 1 John out there. They're going to be able to read that. And he says there are false prophets that are gone out into the world. Now, the false prophet's going to be espousing light. They're going to be espousing darkness. They're going to be espousing untruth. Now, let's pick it up in verse 2. Hereby know ye the Spirit of God. Every spirit that confesseth that Jesus Christ is come in the flesh is of God. And every spirit that confesseth not that Jesus Christ is come in the flesh is not of God. By the way, if you're a member of the believing remnant and a guy comes into the assembly and he says to you one day at the break, I guess they have breaks in the remnant, I'm not sure. But if you were a part of the remnant and somebody came up and said, you do realize that Jesus didn't really come in the flesh. The Christ did not appear in the flesh. Now they have something written that gives them something very specific about how to know if this guy is pushing light or darkness.
This actually came up in a conversation.
Yeah. So, and every spirit that confesseth not that Jesus come in flesh is not of God. And this is the spirit of Antichrist, whereof you have heard that it should come, and even now already is in the world. Is it in the world? Ye are of God, little children, and have overcome them, because greater is He that is in you than he that is in the world. They are of the world. I just want to notice that this is not just about Israel. This is going to be happening in the world. Time out. You remember how we were as Gentiles before God started working us in the dispensation of grace? We were in total darkness. Do you know why? Because we worshipped every god out there except the true God. But the true God began to deal directly with Gentiles, and all of a sudden, through the message of the mystery, that changed. But when this dispensation of grace is over and God resumes His program with Israel, God's direct dealing with the Gentiles will be over once again. And do you want to take a big guess about what's going to happen to the Gentile nations once this door of God's direct dealing is no longer happening? They're going to go right back to where they were, being darkness. Do you not see that that alone is an escalation of the darkness of this world? They are of the world, therefore speak they of the world, and the world heareth them. We are of God. He that knoweth God heareth us. He that is not of God heareth not us. Hereby know we, and here's the contrast again, the spirit of truth and the spirit of error. We have that dichotomy presented to us again. And so God, just as John was dealing with his gospel back here in his epistles, he's going to be picking up that same issue now and educating the remnant about that, about the issues of light and darkness and truth and error and those false prophets and all that kind of business. Oh, good. So, Here's what we're going to have to do. We're going to have to come back and we're going to have, now what we're going to have to do is look at, I think you have everything that you need to see to convince you about what really is the light, what really is the darkness, and now we're going to have to look at the activities that Satan is engaged in his works of darkness. And on your timeline, I'm going to ask you to write them right here in the dispensation of grace, because those are the works of darkness that we're going to cast off. And that's where we're going to start when we take up this next time. These works of darkness are necessary for Satan as he functions as the power of darkness. He needs those works of darkness to make his night into what he wants it to be. And so when we read Romans 13:12, the night is far spent, you automatically know, because, look, this is what I didn't understand when I first started studying this passage. When it said the night, the part that's highlighted, the night is far spent, if I had understood all of this, I could have looked at that term, the night, and immediately known this was something Satan was doing. But do you see that now? Do you see that? Because he says, the night is far spent, you should have said, oh, the thing that Satan is doing in producing darkness in this world as the power of darkness, utilizing his works of darkness, he is producing that night. And it started back here. Next week we'll talk about what started that night. And now it's come through to a place where the night is far spent. Something that Satan is doing in the world. The night has gone a long time. It really has. And not only is he in it alone, but we're also going to see that there are angels who are assigned to promote these works of darkness. These works of darkness that we wrote in here happening during the dispensation of grace. Yes, they were happening before, but these are the ones that we're going to cast off. And so, in order to get that done, just take a look. Ephesians 6, finally, my brethren, be strong in the Lord and in the power of His might. Put on the whole armor of God. Look in Romans 13. This is a continuation of what started in Romans 13:12. In Romans 13, guess what you do? You get issued some basic armor. It's the armor of light. But by the time you advance to level 2 of your sonship, you get acquainted with all of the wiles of the devil, and then you'll need the whole armor. And you'll put that on over there. Put on the whole armor of God that you may be able to stand against the wiles of the devil. For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world. And what we're going to discover now is that it is these angels that have been given the task of promoting these works of darkness and getting them going. And it's those works of darkness that produces the night. And the more those works of darkness are adopted and employed, and the more they spread, the darker the night. And the darker the night, folks, the less... The only way to get a darker night is to do what? Lessen the light. And that's what they're meant to do. Extinguish the light. And so, as we are on the very precipice of this issue, you need to know right up front that when you put on the armor of light, it's not just the fact that Satan looks and bink, there's a light that came on, but it's what that light is that he's opposed to. And it's what that light is doing during this dispensation of grace with his night of darkness, and how it's negatively impacting this momentum that he needs to build to get into this. And because of that, he's going to react against us and to get us to diminish our light. And these are the guys that are in charge of those works of darkness that are actually producing that darkness of night. and you know what? And that is all designed to keep people from coming to the knowledge of the truth. And so that's going to be happening with us. Now I've talked about this verse. Let me just show it to you so we can wind this up. And this is the condemnation, that light has come into the world. See, this is John talking about when Jesus, that light has come into the world, and men love darkness rather than light because their deeds were evil. And that was the condition of men back here. They loved that darkness because what they were doing was not of the truth. They didn't just embrace darkness. This is what was amazing to me. They loved it. They loved the untruth rather than the truth. Now, the last one I want to show you is in Acts 26. This is Paul talking to King Agrippa about his Damascus Road salvation experience. And here's what he says. At midday, O king, I saw in the way a light from heaven. And that, by the way, was a physical light. We're not talking about light in the spiritual sense. I saw a light from heaven above the brightness of the sun shining round about me and them which journeyed with me. And when we were all fallen to the earth, I heard a voice speaking unto me and saying in the Hebrew tongue, Saul, Saul, why persecutest thou me? It is hard for thee to kick against the pricks. And I said, Who art thou, Lord? And he said, I am Jesus whom thou persecutest. But rise and stand upon thy feet, for I have appeared unto thee for this purpose, to make thee a minister and a witness, both of these things which thou hast seen, and of those things in the which I will appear unto thee, delivering thee from the people and from the Gentiles, unto whom now I send thee. And he is going to give him the purpose for sending him to these Gentiles, to open their eyes and to turn them from darkness to light, and from the power of Satan unto God. Now that's really the part that I'm after right here. It's not that the rest of it's not important, but germane to what we're talking about, he's telling Paul, this is the purpose that I have in revealing to you the things that I have and will reveal to you. It is to take these Gentiles and open their eyes and turn them from untruth to truth, from darkness to light, and from the power of Satan unto God. And the power, what is it that gives Satan his power? It's that. It's the works of darkness. That's where his power comes from. And the more, this is another reason it matters. This is another reason that if we say pray for rain and God's not doing it, doesn't matter. Yes, because the untruth of darkness, or the darkness of untruth, is the very power source for Satan as he operates as the power of darkness in this world, to produce his night, to extinguish the light, to promote the darkness, to make the untruth more acceptable and more believable and more desirable than the truth. And that's really what he's doing. Because when you talk about the truth of what God's doing today, the normal saved person doesn't want the truth, they want what they want. Which is more desirable if you get sick? You desire for God to do something in your inner man, or is it more desirable for Him to just heal you? And you know the answer for 99 times out of 100. You know what? I really do want God to do something in my inner man, but what I really want is I want Him to heal me. So you know what? That becomes more desirable. And we want that. And then the truth, and that becomes the light. Or to put it this way, that's the effectual working of the darkness. Something's going to work in you. Either truth is going to effectually work, the truth of His Word is going to work in you, or the darkness of untruth is going to do its effectual work in you. And this is Paul, when he's talking about this testimony, isn't it? I mean, to me, I look at that and I think, that's it right there in a nutshell, isn't it? This is a big issue to God. We're going to turn them from darkness to light and from the power of Satan unto God. Okay, so now that we've seen that, I think you have seen enough. There shouldn't be any question about what is the light and what. And by the way, this issue is in way more verses than we've looked at. Way more. But now what we're going to do is we're going to have to start looking at the power source of all of this. Because if you're called to cast off the works of darkness, you're not going to be able to just start anywhere. There is a basic fundamental starting point, as with anything. When you get ready to take on a new task, there are fundamental things that you have to do. Huh? It's okay, Karen's calling it the planning stage. You know what? It's all that, you know what? When everything, there are things that have to be done first. Do you ever notice that? In other words, to get a job done, you have to do this first, and then you can do this, and then you can do this. It's going to be the same way in this. And so you can't just willy-nilly run out there and just say, just start gesturing like you're throwing and I'm casting off the works of darkness. That's not it. This is going to have to happen now in something that we're supposed to look at, something we're supposed to know. Well, our inner man, this has all got to be working in our inner man. I'm praying for it to be that way. All right, so that's what we'll engage in next. We'll take a look at that. We're not in the midst of that. We're not through looking at Satan's activities in that because this is his power source. Okay, so let's have a word of prayer and we'll be done. Father, thank you for your goodness and grace to us. This is, Lord, the most important thing that I will do this week is talk to these folks about this issue. And if we're going to be able to labor with you in your operation that confronts Satan and his policy of evil as it is at work in this world today, we're going to have to get these things down. They deserve time and effort and time in prayer and discussion all during the week. Lord, these things ought not be far from our thinking. And as we engage in a lot of things this week, we pray, Lord, that we be able to take these things that we're learning and begin to observe things that are happening in the world around us and see behind the scenes for what they are. And that's going to be a discernment that comes from godly thinking, understanding what all is encapsulated in the night being far spent and the day being at hand. And we thank you, Lord, for your word that guides us into all these